I have directed the Minister of Police and the SANDF to develop a technical plan on where our security forces should be deployed within the next few days in the Western Cape and in Gauteng to deal with gang violence and illegal mining.
South Africa calls up soldiers to back up the police in tackling violent crime and criminal gangs. The government also plans to hire over 5,000 new police officers to improve intelligence and surveillance in a country with one of the highest crime rates globally. So, will it make South Africans feel safer? The latest police statistics show that even though murders have decreased, 63 people were killed on average every day between April and September last year. South Africans also face violent crimes, including armed robberies, gender-based violence and gang violence, particularly in major towns like Johannesburg and Cape Town, as well as in townships and mining towns where criminal networks operate. South African troops have been deployed to conflict areas in Democratic Republic of the Congo, northern Mozambique, and to not only secure borders with neighboring countries like Zimbabwe, but to also curb cross-border crimes. Let's take a closer look at when South African troops have been deployed in the country. In 2019, South African troops were deployed for 3 months to gang hotspots in Cape Flats to help police restore order. They recorded an initial 14% drop of murder rates during the deployments, but crime rates went up soon after the military left. A year later, the government deployed more than 8,000 troops in what was dubbed Operation Ntolela to enforce lockdown restrictions during the COVID-19 pandemic. Critics say there were several reports of civilian intimidation. And in July 2021, the government sent 25,000 troops to quell violence that erupted in KwaZulu, Natal and Gauteng after former President Jacob Zuma was jailed. This was seen as the biggest internal military operation in democratic South Africa. Now, since December 2023, about 3,300 soldiers have been used to combat illegal mining carried out by informal miners known as Zamazamas. They've also been deployed hundreds of troops to protect power plants from sabotage and criminal activities. The government also plans to target chronic gang violence, especially in Cape Town and Cape Flats in Western Cape Province. While in Gauteng, the military will help police carry out operations in Johannesburg and surrounding areas, while illegal mining and violent crime has been on the rise. And troops will also be deployed in the Eastern Cape as part of wider security plan to fight against gang violence. Now, here is how South Africans reacted to the planned military intervention.
We are getting additional boots on the ground, and we're also happy with the announcement of additional 5,500 policemen that they will be trained, because the deployment of the army is not going to be a permanent solution, but whilst we're stabilizing the areas, we need to sustain that reduction as we continue.
But we support it cautiously and optimistically, because it's not something that can be sustained for a long period of time. We need social interventions, we need capacitation of our police force, we need capacitation of our detectives, and most importantly, we need the justice system, our courts and our prosecutors to be capacitated.
Let's hear more from Imran Bukes. He's a political analyst with Orwell Socio-Economic Research Institute, ASRI. He joins me from Durban, South Africa. Thank you for joining us here on Africa Matters. First off, what is your reaction towards the announcement that was made, and do you think that this will bring a lasting security solution to South Africa?
Well, yeah, thanks for having me. One is, I think it's completely understandable that many people are welcoming the decision by President Ramaphosa to send in the military to the Western Cape. You know, many people in communities have to face poverty, a lack of sanitation, and in addition, devastating crime. And in South Africa, there's also perhaps a democracy deficit, a disconnect between people and processes of the state. People accuse President Ramaphosa of not being decisive, of taking too long to take action. And here he sends in the military, and it's widely welcomed. People are not accustomed to seeing decisive action from him. But I think it is the wrong decision because the military should be the last resort. And, like it has been said many, many times before, they're not trained to deal with crime. They're trained, to fight wars. They're trained to be on the battlefront. And in South Africa, we have the nasty experience of having witnessed how they behaved during the COVID crisis. The military was deployed in some areas when people were flouting the rules and the restrictions that were there during COVID. Very often you saw the military acting with devastating force and resulting in even the death of a person.
But
So I think not the right decision.
But then what does the law, South African law, state when it comes to domestic deployment of troops?
We've deployed troops previously to the Western Cape in gang-ridden townships, and the reality is it hasn't helped. I think gangs have come back with greater gusto. We've seen them reorganized. And the fact that you've had the military, particularly in the townships of the Western Cape or Cape Town, has not made a difference.
All right.
So, perhaps we could learn from that previous experience.
All right. Gang violence and criminal gangs is not anything new, in South Africa. Why has it taken long for the government to address this issue, and what can be done differently?
Yeah, I think there are many things that can be done differently. I don't think the government has always taken long. They have acted, the police have acted, but it's not necessarily the solution, right? There are huge structural problems, huge structural issues emerging from apartheid, going into a post-apartheid context. There's huge issues of corruption in the police force. All of those lines become blurred. So I think the structural issue is a big, big issue. And to answer your question about what can be done, I think one is we need police reform. We need to weed out the elements that are corrupt. We need a force that can be trusted. We don't need cadre deployment or nepotism in our security forces. We need people in the security forces to be respectful of the Constitution. Perhaps we also need special courts to deal with the issues of drugs, issues of crime in the Western Cape. And, ultimately, the simplistic response of just having better infrastructure for the police, for the security services.
Right.
I
And,
think all of these sometimes pedestrian things are missing.
I'd just like to get this from you. Is deploying the military a sign that the police have failed, and what structural and social reforms are needed?
What I was alluding to earlier, I think in some cases, or in many cases, the police have failed. And because the communities are so frustrated and raising their views about the levels of frustration, I think the president has taken this decision to sort of address that. We're also nearing a local government election coming up later this year. So I think there perhaps is a connection between the decisions being taken about the military and electoral benefit later this year. So yes, the police may have failed, and we also tend to assume that communities want the military there. But how do we think that communities want the military? It's from the voices we hear. It's from the voices we hear in the media. It's from the popular voices. It's from voices that have access to the media and other spaces. It's not necessarily, an empirically tested view that people really do want the military. Yes, there needs to be a number of structural reforms, much of which I've spoken about before. Special courts, addressing issues of education in communities, addressing poverty, ensuring that people don't, or young people particularly, don't look up to gang leaders as role models. And that's a problem we have not only in South Africa, but in many other parts of the world, particularly Latin America, where
Right.
disillusioned youth living on the margins look to gang leaders.
All right. And recently we've seen South African troops being pulled out of the DRC and peacekeeping missions in the DRC and Mozambique. So why is this happening, and what's the impact to domestic and regional security?
Well, yeah, I think one is in the case of Mozambique, I don't think there's a huge difference, right? We had our troops in the north in Cabo Delgado. But remember, you also have the Rwandan troops there, and the Rwandan troops are, according to the Mozambicans, doing a good job. The other regional complexity is that you have the presence of M23 in the DRC, and there's speculation that Rwanda has a hand in that. And then you have South Africa placing its troops in the DRC. So in effect, you have Rwanda being pitched by proxy against South Africa. So I think that's one level of complexity. And yes, I mean, South Africa has a number of problems on the domestic front. It does not have the capacity that the military should have. So I think deploying troops in Mozambique and deploying troops in the DRC may not necessarily be the right step for South Africa. There's also untested speculation that many big business people have a hand in mining in the DRC, and questions about whether our troops are really protecting the rights of corporate entities, losing troops there, or are they really protecting the interests of the DRC and the interests of South Africa?
All right, Imran Bukas, thank you for talking to us here. To Zambia now, which has become the first African country to accept the Chinese yuan for mining taxes and royalties. The government says the move that began in January aims to cut costs, protect limited dollar reserves, and reflect the country's close trade ties with China. Fungisai Maronga has more from Lusaka.
The mining sector remains central to public finances, with mining primarily copper accounting for over 40% of Zambia's total tax revenue. Officials say allowing payments in Chinese yuan would reduce currency conversion costs and help Zambia better manage roughly $5.7 billion in debt linked to China.
We all know that Zambia has a big debt with China. So when it means paying back, it reduces on the tax base, because we don't now need to look for the dollar for us to pay the debt. And also in terms of most of the machines we're using in the mines are from China, so it also is an advantage to now get space from China.
Traders who import goods from China have welcomed the move.
So last year the dollar was high in terms of the exchange rate between the kwacha and the US dollar. And now that the kwacha has gained, that gives me at least the ability to get a lot of items using the same amount of money that I used to spend last year. I would get a limited stock, but now with the gaining of the kwacha, I'm able to get more stock as compared to last year.
Zambia joins a growing list of African countries that are using the Chinese currency for trade and financial transactions, like Kenya, which converted $3.5 billion worth of Chinese loans in October, and South Africa, which signed a currency swap agreement with Beijing in 2015 for 30 billion yuan to facilitate bilateral trade and investment. While Nigeria renewed a currency swap agreement with China in December for 15 billion yuan, allowing direct exchange between the naira and the yuan that bypasses the US dollar. Last July, the China Development Bank and Development Bank of Southern Africa signed their first yuan-denominated financing cooperation agreement worth 2.1 billion yuan, or nearly $300 million.
Economists say most Zambian households may not feel the impact immediately, as the yuan shift mainly affects trade and government-level transactions rather than everyday spending in kwacha. Chinese lending to African countries dropped to just over $2 billion last year, with research showing that Chinese lenders are increasingly valuing loans in yuan rather than US dollars. But IMF data shows that the yuan accounts for less than 2% of global currency reserves, unlike the dollar and the euro. And this could probably slow Beijing's ambitions to internationalize the yuan in countries like Zambia. Fungisai Moronga, Africa Matters, Lusaka, Zambia.
We head to Ivory Coast now, where a collapse in global cocoa prices is leaving farmers and cooperatives in a desperate deadlock. Despite a government-guaranteed price, exporters are refusing to buy, causing stocks to rot in warehouses and leaving families without income. The world's largest cocoa producer is now facing a financial standstill, as Ilyas Avji reports.
In Diku town, western Ivory Coast, the harvest is plentiful, but the profit is scarce. At the start of the season, the government set a guaranteed price of $5 per kilogram of cacao beans. But as global demand slumps, exporters are refusing to pay, leaving farmers stuck.
We are experiencing difficulties. The cocoa is stored at home, the buyers are not paying. There are some buyers who come to buy, but they take it at a low price, $2.50 or $3. And due to the lack of resources, we are forced to accept these prices.
The bottleneck is at the cooperatives. Here, unsold cacao bags are stacked to the ceiling. Exporters claim Ivorian cacao is now too expensive because of falling international prices. The boom comes after fixing a global shortage, leaving local buyers with rising debts.
Honestly, things haven't been going well for quite some time now, so everything is at a standstill for the moment, and we currently owe the farmers a lot of money.
The industry is now looking to the state regulator to intervene. A program has been launched to buy back 100,000 tons of stalled beans, but for many, it's moving too slowly.
We are very concerned. We were told on television that the government had sent billions to buy cocoa, but so far, frankly, we haven't seen anything.
Ivory Coast produces nearly half the world's cacao, yet its farmers remain at the mercy of a global market they cannot control. The guaranteed price only works if there is a buyer. And for the thousands of families in Cacao Belt, a record harvest has only brought them closer to poverty than ever before. Ilyas Avji, Africa Matters.
Well, it's a different story in Ethiopia, where women from vulnerable communities are rebuilding their lives with support from the Turkish government. Former firewood collectors near Addis Ababa are taking up safer and more sustainable livelihoods after receiving a refurbished workshop and traditional weaving equipment. Zama Lutuli brings us that story.
For years, collecting and selling firewood was how this group of women made a living. The back-breaking work was exhausting and they earned little. But now, these former firewood collectors weave elephant Ethiopian fabrics using traditional techniques.
Because of this association, we are better able to support our families and reduce the hardship of our work. When we collected firewood, our hands and feet became rough from the labor. Now we have learned new skills, earn a salary, and provide for our families in a more sustainable way.
With support from the Turkish government through the Turkish Cooperation and Coordination Agency, TICA, this once dilapidated workspace has been fully refurbished. TICA also donated traditional Ethiopian handlooms and helped them sell their products both locally and even in Turkey and the US.
TICA tried to find some solutions which are sustainable for the problems of Ethiopian people. Again, so from the sustainability aspect, we were trying to make a capacity for them. So with some construction, some physical capacities, and with some equipment donations, we made a good capacity for them to make an income for them and for their family.
These women used to earn 25 US cents per day from selling firewood bundles.
When we collected drywood, we woke up very early and faced many challenges, including the risk of assault, injuries from falls and broken bones. I worked alongside my mother. After returning home in the morning, I would then go to school.
They now earn a steady income by sharing the profit from product sales. The safer working environment and steady income have restored a sense of dignity and pride, even attracting male artisans who now collaborate in the workshop. Data from the United Nations shows that in 2024, more than 90% of Ethiopians use traditional cooking fuels such as firewood, charcoal, and animal dung But with Turkey's support, these women are now weaving a new financial future with their own hands. Zamalu Tuli, Africa Matters.
Now, millions of Nigerian Muslims have begun their month-long period of fasting and prayer. But many families and religious leaders are facing the holy month under difficult economic conditions, as Dolapo Aderinokun reports from Lagos, Nigeria.
From the busy markets of Kano to neighborhood mosques in Lagos, communities are marking the start of Ramadan. But many families and clerics are also dealing with the strain of rising living costs.
The food given to us in this house is what we depend on, our children, our grandchildren and ourselves. It is what sustains us. We have no words except to pray to the Almighty to provide for those who support us and meet their needs.
The holy month began after the crescent moon was sighted. For many families, Ramadan now means balancing faith with financial pressure.
Alhamdulillah, we thank Allah for the people surrounding here. It's a big community. Of course, if they didn't spend their money on this course, what else? Where will you spend your money to enjoy yourself when the place to spend is even close to you here? So every evening time, especially now that economy is getting somehow. But before, people come here with, you will see 100 bags of rices. People come here and then distribution. Since I came, when I know.
The economic challenges are also eating traders.
We don't have customers, and it's usually not like this. Fish is too expensive. It wasn't this bad last year. People usually buy more during Ramadan, but not anymore. We're no longer making sales.
Mosques across the state are opening their doors for larger congregations. Communities have been invited to attend Tarawih, special nightly prayers held during Ramadan, and many mosques are organizing iftar meals for those in need, supported by donations.
This gesture is what is keeping us going, especially now that my husband is sick. This food is our only source of survival. I keep some for my children. They eat before school and again when they return.
Here in Lagos, residents are grappling with skyrocketing prices for essentials like proteins, while some food prices like tomatoes and peppers have eased slightly from festive peaks in January. Staples like rice and beans remain a significant investment for the average family.
As families wake before dawn for sahur, the meal eaten before the day's fast, the message from every corner of the country is clear. Ramadan 2026 is not just about fasting, but about solidarity and support. Dolapo Aderinokun, Africa Matters, Lagos, Nigeria.
From the quiet of the first to the roar of the river, Nigeria's historic Arugungu Fishing Festival is back after 6 years. The one-day event brought culture, competition, and tourism back to Kebbi State, which has been suffering from instability. Grace Kuria Kanja reports.
It looks like a movie scene, but it's actually hundreds of West African fishermen competing at the Arugungu Festival that was held from February the 10th to 15th this year. They came armed with hand-woven nets and calabash gourds, fishing for the season's largest catch.
This year, things went peacefully, and there was a bigger crowd than the last time, and also we caught 100% more fish compared to the last event.
Kebbi State has struggled with attacks by armed groups for some time, and that's why the festival held on the Matan Fada River had been put on hold. The over 50,000 fishermen who took part in the competition had their eyes on the top catch, but many found success on a smaller scale.
Yes, I made a big catch today, and I already sold it for 4,000.
The 92-year-old cultural fishing festival is recognized by the UN's cultural agency UNESCO for preserving heritage, and it continues to draw crowds.
Excitement here, all of us were excited. I mean, the famous Arugungu Festival that we've been told in primary schools or secondary schools, we're all excited. I mean, it's worth all the excitement. It's fun and eye-catching. Entertaining as well.
This is my second time here. My first experience was in the year 2020
And I didn't have much knowledge, so that's why I come back to have a fuller experience of Argungu Fishing Festival. And it has been very awesome.
In the end, the winner was a local Nigerian fisherman who caught a 59-kilogram monster fish, driving away with 2 new cars and swimming in £1 million cash prize, or $700 US. Grace Kuriakanja, Africa Matters.
That's our show this week. Let us know what should be done to tackle crime in South Africa and any other stories you've seen here. You can leave your comments on our Africa Matters YouTube page or on X. Thanks for watching, and it's goodbye from me, Brenda Zeda Radido.